Welcome to Spellbound Studio. This is Artist on Art. This is a monthly series where I explore media that's personal to my interest while creating artwork that unfolds alongside the story. Before we begin, I would love for you to become a star in the Spellbound constellation by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. It is the easiest way to support the work and keep this series alive. Today, I'm diving into the mythology of Battlestar Galactica 2004. Specifically, the symbolic and mythological journeys of Laura Roslin, Thrace, Sharon Valerii, and Cylon Number Six. This is not just science fiction, it's prophecy, faith, identity, and survival written in the stars. So settle in and let's begin. How Battlestar Galactica mythologizes female authority without sanitizing it. One of the most radical things that Battlestar Galactica does is that it allows women to hold mythic authority without demanding that they become palatable. The women that I'm talking about in this essay today are not softened to make their power acceptable. They're not cleansed of anger, contradiction, or moral failure. Instead, the series insists that authority, real authority, is always compromised, it's always costly, and it's always human. Laura Roslin does not rule through charisma or strength. She rules through endurance and through administrative labor. She makes decisions that cannot be undone. Her authority is quiet, procedural, and devastating in its consequences. The show does not protect her from the ugliness of leadership. It lets her be wrong. It lets her manipulate systems and violate democratic ideals in the name of survival. And it never pretends that these choices are noble simply because she is dying or because prophecy may favor her. Thrace is given a different kind of authority. She is rooted in instinct and disruption. Starbuck is never positioned as a model citizen or an aspirational leader. She is volatile, self-destructive, and abrasive. However, the narrative repeatedly centers on her as necessary. Not admirable, necessary. She is the hand that breaks the pattern so that something new can emerge. The show does not rehabilitate her rough edges, it weaponizes them. Starbuck's authority comes from refusal, from her inability to fit cleanly into the roles offered to her. Cylon Number Six and Sharon complicate the authority even further by severing it from humanity altogether. They are not granted legitimacy through assimilation. They are not redeemed by becoming more human than human. Instead, they are allowed to hold belief, conviction, and moral agency while remaining fundamentally other. Their authority emerges from embodiment, what it means to feel, to choose, to suffer, without requiring forgiveness from those that they have harmed. What unites these women is not virtue, it is responsibility. None of them are sanctified by the narrative. They are mythologized through burden and consequence. And the slow accumulation of choices that have reshaped the world around them, whether they intended it to or not. Battlestar Galactica refuses the fantasy that power, when held by women, must be nurturing or just. It allows power to be ugly and still meaningful. And this is why the series resonates so strongly on a mythic level. Myth has never been about purity. It has always been about scale, about what happens when individual flaws ripple outward into collective fate. Battlestar Galactica understands that female authority does not need to be softened to be sacred. It only needs to be taken seriously. Cylon 6 enters Battlestar Galactica not as a person, but as a proposition. She is introduced to us as certainty with a face, belief given a body, devotion sharpened into seduction and strategy. She walks into human space already convinced that she is right. She is convinced that she is chosen, and she is convinced that what she is about to do is not only necessary, but sacred. And that certainty is important because it is the first lie that the show lets her tell. 6 believes that she knows what God wants. She believes that obedience will protect her from doubt, and Battlestar Galactica is, in many ways, the long and painful story of how that belief fails her. From the start, 6's relationship to mysticism is not organic. It is implanted. She is created with belief already inside of her. It is coded into her consciousness as truth rather than choice. God loves the Cylons. God has a plan. Humanity is corrupt, violent, and disposable. The genocide of the 12 colonies is not framed for her as atrocity, but as purification. This is not faith born of struggle. It is faith inherited fully formed. And that distinction matters because it shapes everything that comes after. When 6 detonates the nuclear bomb on Caprica, she does so with absolute conviction. There is no hesitation, no visible moral fracture. She smiles. She experiences transcendence. She believes that she is fulfilling divine will. This moment becomes the axis around which her entire arc will eventually break, because it is the last time that her belief is uncomplicated. Everything after this, every doubt, every fracture in evolution, is the fallout of that belief. What Battlestar Galactica understands and handles with unusual care is that belief imposed without choice does not inoculate against guilt. It only delays it. 6 survives the destruction of humanity, not because her faith protected her, but because her faith initially shields her from consequence. She is insulated by doctrine. God wanted this. Therefore, she is innocent, and she is also righteous, and that insulation allows her to function until it does not. The turning point is not philosophical, it is intimate. It is Gaius Baltar. 6's relationship with Baltar is not just seduction, manipulation, or romance. It is incarnation. Through Baltar, 6 becomes entangled with humanity in a way that doctrine cannot fully contain. Baltar is weak, afraid, selfish, brilliant, cowardly, and loving all at the same time. And this is everything that 6's belief systems told her that humans were, and it also failed to explain it. Loving Baltar destabilizes her certainty because it introduces contradiction. She cannot reconcile her affection for him with the annihilation that she helped carry out. And for the first time, belief begins to cost her something. And this is where her mysticism shifts. God is no longer simply a justification. God becomes a question. Head 6, so the main 6, because there's several 6s, is an internalized guiding presence, and she complicates this even further. She speaks with divine confidence, but her guidance grows increasingly ambiguous. Is she God? Is she programming? Is she conscious? Is she trauma? Battlestar Galactica never gives us a clean answer to this question, and that ambiguity is deliberate. Because for 6, belief is no longer external command. It is internal pressure. God does not issue orders. God demands interpretation, and interpretation introduces doubt. And as the series progresses, Six experiences something radical. She experiences regret. Not abstract remorse, but embodied guilt. She mourns the dead. She grieves the children who never grew up. She begins to acknowledge the horror of what she has done without fully abandoning the belief that led her there. This tension, holding guilt and faith simultaneously, is the crucible that reshapes her. Most importantly, Six does not stop believing. This is not a deconversion arc, it is a maturation of faith through suffering. Her belief becomes less triumphant, it's not as clean, and it's no longer weaponized. God is no longer a banner under which anything can be justified. God becomes something that hurts. And this pain makes her dangerous to the other Cylons. Six begins to fracture from her own people, not because she doubts God, but because she begins to understand that certainty has limits. She questions authority. She resists consensus. She recognizes that divine will cannot be reduced to unanimity or control. In Cylon society, this is heresy. The irony is sharp. The creature designed to embody perfect belief becomes a problem because she starts thinking. Six's imprisonment, torture, and humiliation at the hands of other Cylons is one of the series' most brutal theological statements. Faith does not protect her from violence, and orthodoxy does not save her. She suffers not because she abandoned belief, but because she complicated it. In this way, Six's arc mirrors the oldest religious stories: the prophet rejected by their own people, and the believer punished for refusing to simplify God. What ultimately transforms Six is embodiment. Pain anchors her, love grounds her, fear humbles her. Her mysticism stops floating above reality and starts pressing into it. God is no longer an abstract justification for annihilation. God becomes something that exists alongside responsibility. By the time we reach the later seasons, Six is no longer defined by seduction or certainty. She is defined by endurance. She has survived guilt, doubt, and torture. She has survived being wrong. And this survival changes how she understands purpose. Salvation is no longer about cleansing the universe of corruption. It becomes about preventing further harm. She chooses mercy even when doctrine does not require her to do so. Her partnership with Baltar evolves alongside this. Together they move from mutual exploitation to mutual recognition. They become mirrors for one another. They are two beings who were convinced that they were special, chosen, protected by forces beyond themselves. And they discover instead that belief does not spare you from consequence. It only gives you language for surviving it. Six's mysticism by the end of the series is quiet. It is no longer performative. She does not evangelize. She does not command. She waits. She listens. And she hopes. Not for victory, but for meaning that does not require extinction. And then, of course, there is the ending. Six survives into the new world, not as a conqueror or as a purifier, but as a participant. She chooses to live amongst humans without dominance, without superiority, and without certainty that she is right. Her belief does not vanish, but it no longer needs to be proven through force. God becomes something that can coexist with ambiguity. And this is where the mythic layer hums beneath the surface. Six is not simply a villain redeemed. She is not a believer disillusioned. She is a figure of revelation who learns restraint. She becomes a divine messenger who discovers that delivering the message does not grant moral immunity. She begins as apocalypse and ends as a witness. She moves from instrument to interpreter, from weapon to bearer. What makes Six extraordinary is that she is allowed to be wrong without being erased. Battlestar Galactica does not absolve her. It does not forget what she did. It allows her to live anyway. That survival is not forgiveness, it is consequence. She must carry what she knows forward, and she must live with the knowledge that belief, when unexamined, can justify annihilation. Six teaches us that mysticism without humility becomes violence, and that certainty is intoxicating. She also learns that God, when used as proof instead of mystery, becomes a blunt instrument. But Six also teaches us something gentler and more rare, that belief can evolve without collapsing. Faith can survive guilt, and devotion can be transformed by love. She begins as the face of righteous destruction and ends as the embodiment of complicated hope. And that is why she belongs at the center of Battlestar Galactica's spiritual architecture. Not because she was chosen, but because she chose to keep believing after belief cost her everything. Starbuck's story in Battlestar Galactica does not begin with faith. It begins with defiance. She is introduced as refusal made flesh. She refuses authority, restraint, and explanation. From the first moment that we meet her, Kara Thrace exists in opposition to systems that claim certainty. She does not want answers. She wants motion. She wants speed. She wants the next fight, mission, the next distraction that keeps her from sitting still long enough to feel the weight of who she is. And this matters because Starbuck's relationship to mysticism is not chosen. It ambushes her. Unlike Cylon 6, Kara does not seek meaning. Meaning haunts her. It interrupts her life in flashes, in music, dreams, and coincidences that she refuses to call miracles. And every time it does this, she reacts the same way, with anger and denial, and reckless action. Kara is not afraid of death. She is afraid of being interpreted, of being told that who she is might mean something that she did not consent to. Starbuck is raised in violence long before the war begins. Her mother's abuse, justified through discipline and twisted love, teaches Kara an early and brutal lesson that authority hurts. Obedience is never safe, and the rules can hurt you. This childhood shapes everything about her. It is why she cannot submit cleanly to command. It is why she self-sabotages. It is why she equates care with punishment and intimacy with pain. And it is why mysticism, when it enters her life, feels like a trap. The first intrusion comes through the mandala, the eye of Jupiter, a symbol that means nothing to her until it means everything. It appears without warning or context or even permission. Kara does not experience it as revelation. She experiences it as a violation. Something has reached into her mind and basically rearranged the furniture. She cannot explain it, she cannot escape it, and she cannot outrun it. And this is where Battlestar Galactica becomes quietly cruel with her. Starbuck is the character most clearly touched by something beyond comprehension. And she is also the character least emotionally equipped to process it. She is given visions without instructions, knowledge without comfort, and destiny without clarity. And every time she tries to reject it, the universe tightens its grip. And her death is the access point. Kara Thrace dies alone in a wrecked Viper, believing that she has failed. There is no choir, no light, or explanation. And then, impossibly, she returns, whole, unscarred, alive. Except not alive in any way that the show really articulates cleanly. From this point forward, Starbuck exists in a state of crisis. She knows that she died, she remembers it, but she cannot reconcile her continued existence with any framework that she trusts. And that distrust is key. Starbuck does not embrace resurrection as proof of divine purpose. She experiences it as a terror. If she cannot trust her own death, then what can she trust? If her body can be replaced, rewritten, and returned, what does identity even mean? Kara begins to spiral not because she thinks that she is chosen, but because she suspects that she is manufactured, and that her selfhood might be conditional, that her life might not belong to her. And this is where Starbuck's arc diverges sharply from the traditional Messiah narratives. She is not comforted by the idea that she matters cosmically. She is horrified by it. She interrogates her own blood. She checks her memories. She searches for proof of authenticity. The revelation of her body on Earth, her own corpse, is not closure. It is annihilation. And she confirms her worst fear, that she is no longer fully real. And yet she keeps going. Starbuck continues to fly missions, continues to fight, to love. And she loves badly and fiercely and destructively, but she still loves. Her relationships with Lee and with Adama and with the fleet itself are strained by the fact that she cannot explain herself without sounding insane. The audience understands what she is experiencing, but the characters around her mostly do not. And this isolation compounds her fear. Kara does not want to be a symbol. She wants to be a pilot. And music becomes the only thing that reaches her without hurting her. The prominent song used for her is all along the Watchtower. And this song does not feel like prophecy to her, it feels like recognition. This is something Sherry knows without knowing how she knows it. And that's unsettling. The idea that truth might be remembered rather than discovered threatens her sense of agency. If she already knows, then when did she choose? Starbuck's story resists explanation until the very end. Even when the pieces fall into place, even when she understands her role in leading the fleet to Earth, she never actually claims authority. She does not preach or command belief. She does not demand recognition. She does her job. She completes the task. And when it is finished, she leaves. Her disappearance is one of the most radical choices that the show makes. There is no death scene, no ascension, no reward. Kara Thrace simply ceases to be present once her purpose is fulfilled. She does not stay to build a new world. She does not take a place of honor. She does not linger to be explained. She exits the narrative the same way she lived it, refusing containment. And this is where the mythic layer becomes unavoidable. Starbuck is not a savior in the traditional sense. She is a psychopomp, a guide between states. She moves the fleet from annihilation to arrival, from repetition to rupture, from closed cycle to possibility. And once that transition is complete, she cannot remain. Her existence is liminal. It is transitional. She belongs to the crossing and not the destination. But what makes Starbuck's mysticism so powerful is that it is never soothing. It does not heal her trauma, does not excuse her behavior, and it does not absolve her of violence. It simply insists that she matters now, in motion, in struggle, without explanation. The divine does not make her better, it makes her necessary. Starbuck's story is about what happens when meaning does not come with comfort, when destiny does not feel like purpose but like erosion. This is what happens when the universe uses you and does not thank you, but you still show up anyway. She begins as chaos, given a fighter, basically I guess a fighter jet, a space fighter jet. She ends as a question that the universe refuses to answer, and that refusal is the point. Kara Thrace is not proof that belief saves. She is proof that uncertainty can still carry you forward, that you can be terrified, furious, broken, and still be exactly where you are needed, that you don't have to understand your role to fulfill it. And in this series, once again, a series obsessed with God, cycles, and prophecy, Starbuck stands apart as the figure who never makes peace with being chosen, and she still chooses to act. This is not the promise of renewal. This is the promise of the passage. And when the crossing is complete, she is gone. Sharon's story in Battlestar Galactica begins in the quietest and most insidious way possible, as normalcy. She is not introduced as a herald of God or a figure of prophecy or even a walking contradiction. She is introduced as a competent officer doing her job. She blends in, she belongs, and that is exactly why her arc cuts so deeply. Because Sharon's relationship to mysticism is not loud or theatrical. It is discovered retroactively through betrayal, survival, and love. When Sharon learns that she is a Cylon, it is not framed as revelation, it is framed as rupture. The truth arrives violently, shattering not only her understanding of herself, but the trust of everyone around her. She did not know what she was. She did not choose her programming. She did not consent to the role that she was designed to play. And yet, once exposed, she becomes accountable for it anyway. And this is the paradox at the heart of Sharon's arc. She is guilty of crimes that she did not consciously commit, and she is innocent of the intentions that she is punished for. Unlike Six, Sharon does not start with belief. She starts with confusion. Her first encounters with Cylon mysticism are external and hostile. Other Cylons speak of God with certainty and purpose and destiny. Sharon hears those words and feels nothing but distance. Their God does not feel like her God. Their certainty does not map onto her lived experience. She does not feel chosen. She feels violated, used, and rewritten. The faith that animates the Cylons is something that she stands adjacent to and not within. And because of this, Sharon's arc becomes one of the most profound examinations of choice in the series. When she is imprisoned, interrogated, and distrusted by the humans that she believed that she was protecting, Sharon is forced into a reckoning that belief alone cannot resolve. Faith does not save her. Doctrine does not explain her loyalty. There is no prophecy that redeems her. What saves Sharon is something far more fragile and human than that. Relationships save Sharon. Sharon's bond with Hilo is not symbolic. It is foundational. Hilo believes in Sharon before she believes in herself. He treats her as a person even when every system around them insists that she is an object, a weapon, and a threat. This belief is not mystical in the religious sense, but it becomes spiritually transformative. It anchors Sharon to a moral reality that cannot be overwritten by programming. And this is where Sharon's mysticism quietly takes shape. She does not experience God through visions or voices. She experiences God through consequence. Through the unbearable weight of knowing that she has harmed people she loves. Through the terror of being seen as irredeemable. And through the fear that no amount of love will ever make her safe in either world. Sharon's faith, such as it is forged in exile. And her pregnancy becomes the turning point. Hera is not framed as a miracle because of prophecy alone, but because she forces Sharon to confront embodiment in a way that no doctrine can sanitize. Sharon's body becomes contested ground by Cylons who see Hera as proof of divine design, and by humans who see her as a threat to survival. In both cases, Sharon is reduced. Her agency is secondary to what she carries. And this echoes the oldest mythic patterns of women whose bodies become vessels for destiny, while their consent remains negotiable. But what Sharon does with this is extraordinary. She chooses. Again and again she chooses. She chooses Hilo. She chooses Hera. She chooses humanity. She does this not because they're flawless, but because she knows them. She chooses love over abstraction, and in doing so, she commits the ultimate heresy in a system built on obedience. She refuses to let belief override responsibility. Sharon's relationship to Cylon faith remains tense throughout the series. She does not reject God outright, but she never surrenders herself to certainty. She watches what belief does to others, how it justifies violence and erases doubt, and how it demands sacrifice without accountability. And she refuses to participate. Her spirituality is not performative, it is practical. If God exists, Sharon believes, then God must coexist with choice. Otherwise, belief is meaningless. This position isolates her. She is never fully trusted by the humans, even when she bleeds for them. She is never fully accepted by the Cylons, even when she shares their biology. Sharon exists in a liminal state, too human for the machines and too artificial for the humans. And this is this in-between space where her identity crystallizes. She becomes something new, not through destiny, but through persistence. Her role in the allegiance between humans and Cylons is not glamorous. She is not the visionary or the prophet. She is the bridge, and bridges are walked on, used, taken for granted. Sharon absorbs distrust, resentment, and fear without the promise of recognition. She does not demand to be seen as special. She demands only to be allowed to protect what she loves. And this is the quiet holiness of Sharon Valerii. By the end of the series, Sharon has become a mother, not because prophecy required it, but because she refused to surrender her child to abstraction. Hera is not a symbol to her, she is a person, and that distinction matters. Sharon's greatest act of faith is insisting that individuals matter more than narratives, that love is not a means to an end, and that survival without ethics is hollow. In the New World, Sharon does not arrive as leader or legend. She arrives as someone who has earned her place through loss. She does not claim moral authority. She carries memory. She knows what it costs to belong. And she chooses to belong anyway. The mythic resonance here is subtle but powerful. Sharon is the covenant figure, the one who binds two worlds through sacrifice rather than conquest. She is not the chosen mother because a God declared it to be so. She becomes a chosen mother because she refuses to abandon her child even when every system around her demands it. Her sanctity is not bestowed, it is practiced. What makes Sharon's arc so devastating and so hopeful is that it insists faith is meaningless without choice, that belief without consent is violence, that redemption is not about purity, but it is about persistence. Sharon does not escape what she is. She lives with it. She builds a future anyway. She starts as a sleeper agent who does not know that she is asleep. And she ends as a woman fully awake, aware, and still willing to love. And in a series obsessed with gods, cycles, and destiny, Sharon stands as its quiet rebuke, that the most sacred act is not obedience, but choosing to care when caring costs you everything. In a narrative crowded with gods who speak, angels who fall, and leaders who proclaim destiny, Sharon never claims cosmic significance for herself. She does not argue theology or demand absolution. She simply continues to act as though her choices matter, even when the universe seems structured to prove that they do not. This is her quiet defiance. She refuses the idea that meaning must be granted from above. She lives as though meaning is made through care, presence, and the refusal to abandon the vulnerable. Sharon also exposes one of Battlestar Galactica's most uncomfortable truths: that systems, no matter if they are religious, political, or technological, are far more willing to sacrifice individuals than they are to question their own righteousness. Humans justify cruelty in the name of survival. Cylons justify cruelty in the name of God. Sharon belongs fully to neither logic. She recognizes that certainty is often just another word for permission, so she lives without it. In the end, Sharon is not redeemed because she proves that she was really human all along. She is redeemed because she insists that humanity is not a category. It is a practice. It is something that you do repeatedly, imperfectly, and without guarantees. Her story tells us that identity imposed without consent is a wound. But identity chosen in spite of that wound can still be sacred. She does not inherit a future, she builds one. And in my opinion, this is the most radical faith that the series ever offers. That even in a universe obsessed with cycles and inevitability, a single person choosing love again and again can bend the story towards something more meaningful. Laura Roslin's story begins where most myths end, with a death sentence. She is introduced not as a warrior or as a visionary or even someone seeking power. She is a woman quietly preparing to die. Cancer has already claimed her future before the Cylons ever arrive. She expects obscurity and the slow erasure of relevance. And then, in the space of a single morning, the world ends and she becomes president. This matters because Laura's relationship to mysticism is not chosen out of curiosity or hunger. It is forced upon her by catastrophe. Faith does not enter her life as comfort, it enters as responsibility. At first, Laura resists this, right? She's a rationalist by temperament. She's a bureaucrat. She was a school teacher who believes in systems and institutions and in the power of incremental reform. When her visions start, they're triggered by illness and by trauma. She treats them as symptoms and hallucinations. She thinks that they're just neurological misfires. They're anything but revelations. Laura does not want to be a prophet. She wants to be competent. She wants to keep people alive long enough to matter. But Battlestar Galactica does not allow her that luxury. The prophecies do not wait for her consent. They surface in fragments, symbols, and echoes of ancient scripture that she does not fully understand. The dying leader, the path to Earth, the shape of the journey already written. And Laura's horror is not that these things might be true. It is that people begin to believe her. Authority transforms belief into danger. Once people listen, Laura's private uncertainty becomes public consequence. Every decision she makes carries the weight of both political power and divine implication. If she ignores the visions and they were real, then she'd risk annihilation. If she follows them and they were delusion, she risks tyranny. This is the impossible bind of sacred leadership. You are responsible whether or not you believe. Laura's evolution into a religious figure is gradual and deeply uncomfortable. She does not proclaim herself chosen, others do that for her. She is elevated, interpreted, and mythologized against her will. And as her illness progresses, the line between vision and vulnerability blurs even more. Her body becomes unreliable even as her authority solidifies. The very thing that grants her insight is actually killing her. And this is where Laura's arc becomes devastating. Laura is not given the luxury of clean faith. Her belief is always suspect to herself, to others, and to history. She makes choices that cross ethical lines. She manipulates elections. She sanctions violence. She allows faith to override law when she believes that survival demands it. And every time she does, she pays for it internally. Laura is not intoxicated by power. She is worn down by it. Her partnership with Adama anchors her. Adama does not share her visions, but he trusts her judgment. Their relationship is not romanticized belief. It is mutual accountability. He challenges her when faith hardens into dogma, and she steadies him when command turns brutal. Together they create a fragile balance between reason and reverence, each compensating for what the other lacks. Roslin does not become a theocrat because Adama refuses to let her. But still the visions persist. Laura begins to recognize patterns, not as proof of divine benevolence, but as evidence of structure. Something is shaping events. Something is nudging choices. And while she never fully surrenders her skepticism, she does begin to accept that leadership may require listening to forces that she cannot verify. Faith for Laura becomes less about certainty and more about attention. And her relationship with the Cylons further enhances this. Laura is capable of compassion, but it does not come easily. She has seen too much. She carries the extinction of humanity in her bones. Her hatred is understandable, and the show does not soften that point. Yet, even here, belief complicates her stance. I mean, if prophecy demands alliance, what does justice even mean? If survival requires forgiveness, is that forgiveness earned? Laura struggles with these questions not as abstractions, but as policy. And the dying leader prophecy overshadows everything. Laura knows that she is dying. She may not see the end of the journey, and rather than resist this, she integrates it. Her leadership becomes increasingly future-oriented. She prepares others to carry what she cannot finish. She relinquishes control piece by piece. And this is not resignation, it is stewardship. Laura understands that her role is transitional. She is not meant to build the world. She is meant to get them to the world. Her final days are stripped of spectacle. There is no divine confirmation or moment where God speaks and resolves ambiguity. Roslin dies as she lived in power, uncertain, committed, and responsible. Her visions do not absolve her choices. they contextualize it. She does not receive proof that she was right, she receives completion. And in the end, Laura's faith is quiet. She does not demand worship. She does not leave instructions. She leaves a group of people alive long enough to choose something else. Laura's belief never becomes dogma because it is always tempered by doubt. She understands the danger of certainty too well to indulge in it. The mythic resonance here is unmistakable, but it is very restrained. Laura is the reluctant oracle, the dying queen, the prophet who does not like prophecy. She carries the weight of foresight without the relief of clarity. Her sanctity is not declared, it is inferred through endurance. Through the accumulation of impossible decisions made without assurance of correctness. Laura Roslin teaches us that faith in leadership is not about hearing God clearly. It is about acting responsibly when you might be wrong, about holding belief and doubt in the same hands without letting either one become an excuse. She starts as a woman expecting to fade quietly, but she ends as the axis upon which humanity turns, not because she was chosen by God, but because she accepted the burden of meaning when meaning arrived uninvited. And that, more than any vision or prophecy, is what makes Laura Roslin sacred. What makes Laura's arc linger is that it refuses the comfort of vindication. At no point does the universe lean into her and whisper, "You were right." There is no ledger balancing her moral debts, or a divine voice certifying her sacrifices as necessary. History does not pause to thank her, and this absence is the point. Laura's story insists that leadership under existential threat will always be morally incomplete, that survival itself is not proof of righteousness, that faith, when wielded honestly, does not erase guilt, it coexists with it. Laura understands something that few leaders will ever admit, that belief is dangerous not because it might be false, but because it might be useful. Once faith begins to work, and once it starts to produce results, it becomes tempting to stop questioning it. Laura resists this temptation to the end, even when prophecy aligns, even when visions unfold as promised. She never treats belief as permission, she treats it as obligation, and that is her final lesson. Laura Roslin shows us that sacred leadership is not about purity of intention or correctness of belief. It is about the willingness to be answerable to history, to conscience, to the people who must live with the consequences. She never absolves herself through destiny, and she never hides behind God. She carries responsibility the way that she carries illness, without drama, without denial, and without the expectation that it will be fair. When Laura Roslin lets go, she does not do so because the work is finished. She does so because others must now choose without her. And that is also faith. Not necessarily trusting in prophecy, but in people. Trust that survival can become something more than endurance. And this trust also means that you do not require being a witness forever. Laura Roslin does not return. She does not ascend. She simply dies. And in doing so, she reminds us that the most human form of belief is not certainty but care. And that care is carried forward by those who remain. For a series so saturated with prophecy, visions, and divine language, Battlestar Galactica is remarkably unwilling to explain itself. It gestures constantly towards meaning and then withdraws just before certainty arrives. Is God real in this universe? Are the visions divine intervention? Are they recursive time loops or neurological coping mechanisms? Is destiny guiding humanity, or are they simply reenacting patterns they are psychologically incapable of breaking? The series presents evidence for all of these possibilities and then refuses to resolve the tension between them. And this is not a failure of storytelling, rather it is the point of the storytelling. Myth in its oldest forms is not a system of answers. It is a framework for living inside of unanswerable questions. Battlestar Galactica does not ask its characters or the audience to believe. It asks them to act as though meaning might exist even when proof is unavailable. I mean, Laura Roslin followed visions that she never fully trusts. Adama commits to a path that he cannot justify with logic alone. Starbuck fulfills a role when she does not understand and one that she cannot survive. The Cylons pursue transcendence without knowing whether it will annihilate them. Every major choice in the series is made under the conditions of radical uncertainty. There is no moment where a voice declares who is right, and there is no final revelation that sorts faith from delusion. Even the ending is quiet, it's unsettling, and it offers no confirmation that the cycle is broken or that it will repeat differently this time. So if you're someone who expects resolution, this is going to be a deeply unsettling ending. But the myth has never offered closure, it just offers resonance. What the show refuses to answer is whether meaning is imposed from above or constructed from below. Whether God guides humanity, or if humanity invents God in order to endure. Whether prophecy is destiny or self-fulfilling narrative. The series holds these possibilities in balance, and it asks us to sit with the discomfort. In doing so, it makes a quiet demand of the audience. If you cannot know whether your actions matter in some ultimate sense, would you act responsibly anyway? The question is a true legacy of Battlestar Galactica. Not the fate of the fleet or the truth of the gods, but the ethical weight of decision-making in a universe that may never explain itself. And like all good mythology, it leaves that question unanswered because the answer was never meant to be given. If you've made it this far, then thank you very much for giving me your time and your attention and your curiosity. I would love to know what you took away from this. Did any of these characters resonate with you? Do you like Battlestar Galactica? Does it shape the way that you think about faith, destiny, or survival in its own way? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and if you would like to continue this journey through art, mythology, and the stories that stay with us, consider becoming part of the Spellbound constellation by liking the video or subscribing to the channel. Until next time, stay spellbound.